It's a celebration here in the studio because the Cyberwork with Infosec podcast is a winner. Thanks to the Cybersecurity Excellence Awards for awarding us a Best Cybersecurity Podcast gold medal in our category. Yeah. We're celebrating, but we're giving all of you the gift. We're once again giving away a free month of our Infosec Skills platform, which features targeted learning modules, cloud-hosted cyber ranges, hands-on projects, certification practice exams, and skills assessments. To take advantage of this special offer for Cyberwork listeners, head over to infosecinstitute.com/skills or click the link in the description below. Sign up for an individual subscription as you normally would. Then, in the coupon box, type the word Cyberwork, CYBERWORK, no spaces, no capital letters, and just like magic, you can claim your free month. Thank you once again for listening to and watching our podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you coming back each week. So enough of that, let's begin the episode. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork with Infosec podcast. Each week, I sit down with a different industry thought leader, and we discuss the latest cybersecurity trends, how those trends are affecting the work of Infosec professionals, while offering tips for those trying to break in or move up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. Today, we're talking about a specific job within the cybersecurity ecosystem, that of threat intelligence expert. This is a job title that involves both hands-on know-how, but also a great deal of analytical thinking skills, as you're identifying not only threats as they're currently presenting themselves, but a whole host of potential threats on the horizon. So maybe you can think of threat intelligence as the tactician of security. You're not just preparing for the battle in front of you, but for the waves of attacks that you might see in the future. Here to talk with us about this today is Charles DeBeck of IBM's X-Force Incident Response and Intelligence Services. He's had a connected passel of job titles that encompasses risk management, risk analysis, and vulnerability assessment, all of which have helped him to get to his current position now. So we're going to talk about similar tracks you could start on right now and what challenges you should look forward to in the future. Welcome to the program, Charles.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
So based on your job and education background, I'll admit I ransacked your LinkedIn a little bit for this info, but it looks like security and tech aren't the only interest in your life. Some of the guests, we've had have been hacking since childhood, or they, were walked off their high school campus in handcuffs for hacking government mainframes. But, your background shows interest in mathematics, law, political science, and more. So how did you find your way to security and threat analysis, and what was the spark that first set you on the path?
Sure. So I started off, I kind of grew up with computers, right? I was sort of in that same generation with a lot of folks that grew up with computers in the household and used computers for a long time. And when I graduated college, I was kind of looking around, trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And my interest has always really been in logical reasoning. How do we get from A to B to C? And so you kind of see that theme playing off in my education. Mathematics is very much about logical progression of,
Sure,
how you get from A to B. Same thing with law, but that's more from a written sense. How do we get from argument A to argument B?
Right.
Political science, I maintain, is a lot of ways about logical interactions between different groups. So there's sort of a common theme there of an interest in logic problems, logic games, understanding how to get from A to B. And so when I was looking at where I wanted to go, for me, cybersecurity made sense because it's sort of the next step of taking logical problems and applying that to computers, and having this background in computing and background using computers and sort of seeing the relevance of computers, in our everyday lives. To me, it made sense to kind of look at cybersecurity as a potential realm for a career.
Okay, well, I like hearing that because as I try to sort of repeat in these episodes over and over, like you can come to cybersecurity with a whole host of different types of skill sets or interests. You don't just have to have been coding, for decades. You don't have to, be able to do, assembly language in your sleep and all this kind of stuff. Like you can have other interests and still, contribute really strongly to the entire sort of enterprise. So,
absolutely. One of the best guys I knew was he was a police officer. He had no cyber experience. He was a policeman, but then he decided he wanted to go into threat intelligence, and he was just really passionate about it, really excited about it. And so we started working with him, and the guy ended up being one of the best guys we had on the team after a little while. You can train anyone in technical skills. I mean, that sort of technical training is widely available. So you certainly don't have to have a tech-heavy background. And especially for younger generations who have grown up with a mobile device in hand for a long time and have grown up using computers or using mobile devices for a long period of time, just that life experience by itself, in a lot of ways, gives you a leg up in this field, I think.
Yeah, you already know more than you think you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to start out today by clarifying the topic of our discussion, specifically threat intelligence. So just for baseline, let's just sort of define what it is. What is threat intelligence, and what differentiates it from areas of related but different activity, maybe, threat monitoring or security analysis or incident response? Like, what does the job entail as a career track? And can I ask you a little bit about the ways that IBM does threat intelligence gathering and monitoring?
Sure. So the way I commonly describe threat intelligence is when you think about computer security, a lot of times you're looking at the inside the perimeter. So if I'm an organization, if I'm a company, I'm looking at what do I see, hitting my walls, and what do I see within those walls, and how do I best protect against what's going on there.
Yep.
Threat intelligence actually looks outside the walls. So imagine you're a scouting party that's outside the walls of the castle, looking around, trying to see where are the bad guys, because the options are either
you're looking into the woods almost to make sure
exactly
that,
right, because you can either build up all of your walls at the same time and just hope that you hit the right spot, or you can try and see where they're going to come from and build the walls up just right there.
Gotcha.
And that's a much more efficient way to do your security, right? Because if I know that the bad guys are using SQL injection all the time, then I know I need to invest resources in ensuring that my SQL testing is effective. But if they're not doing that, then I can invest those resources somewhere else. So it's a good way to get a sense of where do we see the bad guys coming from on the outside. So it's a little bit different perspective. You're not looking from the inside out so much. You're looking at the outside and seeing what they're doing to see how they might try to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how sort of IBM does this? Where you are right now.
Sure. So IBM, we actually have a kind of interesting model. We are combined with our incident response component. So it's incident response and intelligence services at IBM. And what's kind of cool about that is it's a hand-in-hand process. When we respond to incidents, we can use our threat intelligence to more effectively respond to incidents. So if we see an incident occurring on a client site, we can say, okay, we're going to respond to what's happening there on site at the time. But we're also going to take that information and look at our threat intelligence data and try and figure out, is there other stuff we should be looking for that otherwise we might not be? A lot of times it's very easy to get sort of myopic in your view when something's happening. You sort of say, I just got to take care of this fire. This is the biggest fire.
Right.
But the nice thing about incorporating threat intelligence is we say, okay, so here's the fire that we see right now, but where else might there be fires that are hidden behind the smoke of this big fire over here? And so that's what's kind of cool about that. What I really like about IBM's model is by combining those two elements, we're able to more effectively respond to incidents. And also those incidents can help inform our threat intelligence, so we're able to research more effectively as well. It's a very good symbiotic relationship.
Is this sort of hand-in-hand relationship between, the incident response team and the threat intelligence team, is that a common thing, or is that a fairly unique sort of symbiotic relationship with your organization?
In my experience, I think it's becoming more common. I think a lot of threat intelligence organizations want to get into that sort of area because it's a great relationship to have. There's a lot of challenges to sort of combining these two elements, but so I don't think it's not prevalent everywhere yet. I think it's becoming. I think it's something a lot of organizations are looking into. But I think IBM, kind of the unique benefit that we have is we started off saying, let's do it this way. Let's combine let's use our incident response intelligence services from the get-go. And that gives a little bit of a head start, I think, in that regard.
Okay. I sent you the questions in advance, but I got one extra question that someone on my team asked. Do you see small and medium businesses using threat intelligence? I mean, because it seems like at the moment, like threat intel is kind of the domain of huge enterprises due to the cost of the resources. But, it seems like there could be a use for SMBs too, to say, get some sort of like threat weather report showing maybe secondhand data of some of the threats happening to other industries that are like theirs. Is there anything like that out there? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, I think you make a fair point. I think for a lot of small and medium businesses, the most effective strategy that I've seen is to leverage outside provider. So generally, the model that I've observed, and this is just my personal observations, is that as you get to a larger enterprise, you might have an internal threat intelligence team that just focuses on threat intelligence for your organization, which is great. If you can afford that, and you're a large organization that has a large digital footprint, it makes sense to do that. But if you're a small and medium-sized business that can't possibly afford that sort of payroll, then it might make more sense to outsource that to another organization that does all they do is threat intelligence.
Right.
And then they just give you the reporting on that. It's a great way for you to get that sense of what's going on so that you can help direct your teams. One thing that I found really helps for an organization is if you can't afford to have a threat intelligence team, even having one person who's sort of your threat intelligence person helps quite a bit. because because sometimes what might happen is, you get the reports and everybody kind of assumes that somebody else is taking care of the reports or is reading them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have one person whose job it is, or at least part of their job is to look at those reports, then, at least one person's doing it. And it could be, a half-time job or a quarter-time job. It doesn't have to be their full-time. But as long as you have that sort of designated POC, that helps quite a bit for small and medium businesses to digest threat intelligence, because it's a two-way street. It's not just receiving it. You also have to actually act on it.
Right. So not only do you need someone who's looking at this for some portion of their day, but I imagine there's, also the importance of having, some degree of reporting within, like, the weekly briefings or whatever, like some actual sort of, because I'm sure it would be very easy to say, well, we got, Bob looking at the, the threats, and I'm sure he'll let us know if something's wrong. But, if you're not like, reporting on it each week in your stand-ups or whatever, I'm sure, that's also something to watch out for.
Well, and a big concern as well with threat intelligence, and this is something that I highly recommend when people are looking at threat intelligence vendors to consider, is you want to make sure it's actionable threat intelligence, because sometimes the profession gets a little bit of a bad rap because people say, well, threat intelligence, that's just random war stories. It's interesting, but who cares? What's the point?
Right.
Good, valuable threat intelligence will not just tell you something that's happening out in the wild and just leave it at that, because that's not really helpful. I could say, well, they're using SQL injection. Okay, right. So what? A good threat intelligence will not only tell you, what's happening out there, but also what it means for you and what you can do as sort of an action or follow-on after that. Otherwise, it is just sort of campfire stories, which I love the campfire story, but that's not helpful for me as a business or an organization.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way like a boring teacher teaches history versus one that can make a narrative around it, where there's this thing that happened, but if you don't tell the story so that people can understand, well, it could happen to you, it could be happening right now, whatever, then what's the point? Exactly. So that's interesting, because again, if you're thinking about threat intelligence, make sure you know how to tell a good story.
Right.
That's how you get people
storytelling
interested.
Is really critical. Yeah, it's really critical to provide that context and information, and also to a wide variety of audiences. You might be talking to a CISO who wants a really high level thing, or you might be talking to network defenders who want to know all the tactical details of what's going on. You have to be able to speak both languages pretty effectively.
There you go. Let's talk about that. So let's start with where you are right now. Can you let's walk through your current job title. You are a strategic cyber threat expert. So what does this job entail? What are some of your primary responsibilities? And how much of it is job management of threat intelligence team, and how much is the actual sort of threat intelligence information gathering in an average day?
Sure. So my current role is I'd say about a 50-50 split between more tactical level threat intelligence research and 50% leading projects, leading initiatives in the threat intelligence space.
So you still get to do the hands-on stuff.
Exactly. And I kind of like it that way personally. I like having hand in the tactical level stuff, because to me that makes it so that you keep a good sense of what's happening in the world and you have a good understanding of what you're seeing. But so I guess I'll break the title down. So strategic part, that just means that I tend to work at a bit of a higher level when I'm doing my threat intelligence products. That distinction is, in my mind, there's sort of tactical level where you're working at, you're looking at what are the indicators of compromise that are associated with threat actor activity, or you're going out and you're really diving deep into a few actors. That to me is a much more tactical level. What's happening right here, right now, from a threat intelligence perspective.
Right.
A strategic threat expert like myself, what I tend to do is more broad-based. What trends are we seeing? What have we seen over the last 6 months, a year? How is 2020 different from 2019? So a good example here is if you look at the IBM Threat Intelligence Index. We release those once a year, and we just released our 2019 our index for 2019 not too long ago. Okay. And we said that ransomware was way up, which was kind of interesting because the previous year ransomware had been a bit down. And so it's kind of, when you see these trends, there's, the immediate strategic statement of ransomware is higher or lower. But then there's the important part is, why does this matter? And why do we think this is happening? And so that's what I do at sort of strategic level, is I look across, a wider time stream and say, what are we seeing threat actors trending, and how can we use that information to most effectively implement defenses? Does that kind of make sense?
It does, and it sort of brings up a follow-up question. So, like, what sort of like resources, research materials, like what is your sort of analytical thought process? I mean, let's take that specifically. Ransomware, and we'd seen some reports too that ransomware was going down in 2019, but it's back up again in 2020. So, like, you see something that doesn't quite make sense like that to your mind. Like, what are some of the first steps that you take to sort of break down what the numbers actually mean?
Sure. So the first thing you always got to do is make sure that, you got good numbers, right? So if you see something that doesn't make sense, it's always good to double check your data. And so, I'll look at open source and make sure that matches up. I'll look at our internal data here at IBM and say, okay, what is our data showing us? And then once the data is, clarified and sure looks like there's a trend there, yeah, my sort of process is I start first off by just thinking about logically, what are the possible rationales as to why this could be the case? And so we could say ransomware is more effective because we're seeing a higher payout. They're seeing people paying a ton of money for ransomware. Okay. It could be that ransomware has gotten better, that just the technology, the malware itself is increasing in overall quality, or it's become easier to use. That's another very strong possibility as to why we see ransomware increasing. And then once I kind of have a couple ideas as to what I think it might be, just sort of logically gaming it out. And a lot of that comes from that sort of strategic knowledge that most threat actors are financially motivated and are lazy. And I mean this, in a nice way, but
easiest way possible. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you want to make your money as easy as possible, right? Yeah. And so they're knowing that sort of background and understanding, kind of gaming out the possibilities. Then what I'll do is I'll go to open source, I'll go to my dark web sources, and I'll start trying to find out, are there indications of any of these assumptions being the case? Do we see people posting on forums or dark web marketplaces, hey, my ransomware as a service is on sale now? Am I seeing a lot more offerings on marketplaces? Or am I seeing a lot of people saying, man, this is so easy, anyone should do it? Or more YouTube tutorials about how to use these sorts of products. That's very often the case as well. Or do I see, when I look at the data, are there like collections of activities? So, a bunch of stuff happens in, March, and a bunch of stuff happens in May. That might indicate to me that it's a matter of copycat attacks. And so that's sort of the way I would approach it, is look at what data, first off, try and kind of guess what the possible options might be, and then go out and see what the data supports from the sources you have available. Usually open source, dark web, internal are kind of the key three ones I look at.
Right. That's straight up scientific method right there. You make your hypothesis, and then you test it against the facts and see what happens.
And at the end of the day, threat intelligence is sort of science and an art, I think. I mean, there's only so much the data can tell you, because we don't have perfect data. We don't have 100% collection all over the place.
Yeah, you're not going to find the fortune cookie that says this is how we did it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You love it if some guy would just say, this is why I'm doing this, and be like, oh, well, that's great to know. Thanks. Please tell me more about your personal motivations.
Right.
But that never happens. Yeah. And so lacking that, the other key element to threat intelligence that's sort of subtle is using analytic confidence language. So, there's different, and you can look this up on Google. There's a lot of different ways that you can couch statements to make it as accurate as possible. You can say, I'm medium confidence that this probably occurred.
Right.
That suggests that, that tells you how confident I am in the next statement. And it tells you that probably means it's more likely than not, but not almost certain to be the case. And that's sort of fine detail language. It's kind of a technical skill, but once you get really good at it, it's a great way to be able to make statements based on data, without sacrificing your analytic integrity when you make the statement.
Okay, so this is great because, like I say, that sort of opens up into my next question here. But, we were talking about your background a little bit, that you have the, math background, political science, law background, and all these things obviously contribute strongly, and, it's hard not to see. But what are some specific sort of skills or educational tracks or learning experiences or projects you did in these other fields that you think sort of directly translate to, doing good work as a threat intelligence person? If you have some, these kind of backgrounds and this sounds interesting to you, what are you sort of highlighting for someone saying, I want to get into threat intelligence and here's how I show I can do it?
Absolutely. Very easy question for me. Whenever anybody ever asks about education, my number one first answer, and this should be the number one takeaway from anyone listening to this, is to check out the National Science Foundation's Scholarship for Service program, or the NSF SFS, which is always easy to say.
Yeah.
It's this great program. So what I did is I was a graduate student at Iowa State through this program. And at the time, what they did is they paid for the tuition, room and board, and a stipend for you to get a degree in cybersecurity. It was a 2-year master's degree. In exchange, you have to work for the federal government for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember when I was, this was, I guess, a decade ago now for me. But 10 years ago, 2 years sounded like a really long time to work for the federal government. But what ended up happening was I got a free master's degree out of the deal, and I got great experience at the government for 5 years in exchange for them paying me to do all of this. if you have any interest in cybersecurity, whether it's threat intelligence specifically or a variety of other fields, this is a great way to get the educational background you need, plus potentially get a foot in the door at the government to be able to get the actual hands-on experience that you need to really be able to jump into a cybersecurity career. It's really fantastic. I really can't recommend it enough. So that would be my number one recommendation for if you're looking to kind of get the right education for cybersecurity, just jump into that program. It's a pretty sweet deal.
Cool. So walk me through your average day as a cyber threat expert. Like, what time do you start work? Where does your work take you in the course of the day? Can you structure a day, or are you just constantly putting out fires? Are you able to turn off in the evenings, or are you always on call?
Yeah, so one nice thing about threat intelligence I find is that it's not really an on-fire sort of situation. Of course, there can be situations where it is. And again, since we work with incident response, sometimes you might have an incident come up, and in that case, it's all hands on deck. You have to take care of things right away. And occasionally there are major fires like something like WannaCry, right, which has such a broad impact, such a major event that it's all hands on deck, and you pretty much are working until everything's taken care of. You have people working through the weekend back when that hit, as I recall.
Sure.
So you have that occasionally, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's a pretty good 9 to 5 job. I'm a morning person myself, so I start first thing in the morning. I like 7:30 or 8 and get done around 4:30. But it's not a crazy long schedule. It's kind of a standard 40-hour work week in a lot of ways. So there's a lot to like there, I think, from a work-life perspective. And in terms of sort of the work-life balance, I find that it's nice because when it's done, there's not a lot keeping me up over the weekends. Because usually if I'm working on a research project, especially a broader strategic product like I've been doing in my current role, it's not really something where I'm too worried about it, because this is a 6-month to 1-year trend. We're talking about a pretty long time frame, so I don't think a weekend is going to really change that too much.
Right.
But hopefully not. I mean, with COVID, you never know, right? But, But usually it's not a weekend's not too big of a deal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it goes for me.
Yeah. So what are some of the sort of common tasks you're doing every day? Like, are you talking with clients? Are you, sort of reporting to your board, your C-suite, whatever? Like, what do you do a lot? What do you have to be ready to do a lot if you want to go into this job?
Writing is one of the number one things, and personally, I wasn't somebody who grew up saying, "Man, I love writing papers." Right?
Okay.
Some people love that. I didn't love writing papers. I'm more of a people person.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do like is writing logical papers. I like writing out logical arguments, and so if doing a lot of logical writing and precise writing, if that's something you're kind of into, then that's something that could be a good fit, because that's what a lot of my day is. When I'm writing up threat intelligence reports, a lot of it is connecting dots. Also, as we talked about a little bit before, storytelling is a lot of my day, where I may be writing out stories to people, sort of explaining, here's the background, here's where we are now, and here's what it means, and here's what the future might hold. That sort of progression and logical storytelling in a written form is a lot of what I do. I also brief clients on occasion, and I do enjoy doing that quite a bit, because it's nice to be able to just orally brief someone so that you can get the questions back in real time. That's generally less common, but that's something I do as well. But most of my work is written in nature, and otherwise just researching and reading the news and seeing what's going on in the world, keeping track of things.
Okay. So where does threat intelligence generally stand on the average company hierarchy chart? Who do you report to? Where does it slot into an org chart, especially people who have like a full set of different security staffs? Like, where do you stand?
So usually threat intelligence reports up to the CISO for most organizations that I've seen anyways. There could be another level between here and there. Initial threat intelligence analyst positions, those are kind of entry-level positions, so that can be pretty low level. But that said, I'd say generally getting into threat intelligence in the private industry, in my experience, requires a little more experience, whereas with government, it can be a bit more of an entry-level position, just because with private industry, they're kind of requesting, they kind of want people who've already done this before, and threat intelligence isn't necessarily a field a lot of people jump into as their first field. The nice thing about government is there's some agencies that all they do is intelligence, and so it can be an entry-level position for them because they need to develop that out. Once you get up to sort of the senior level analyst position, there's kind of 2 tracks you can take. You can go either go in depth and be just a really deep dive research analyst who just is out on the deep and dark web and open source all day, every day, researching specific threats that you specialize in. Or you can kind of go the leadership route where you're saying, okay, I want to look at sort of how are we doing our threat intelligence? How can we do it more effectively? I think those are kind of the 2 branching things. But generally, All threat intelligence, in my experience, sort of reports up to the CISO office for a private industry, and for government, it gets kind of wacky.
A little different. So is threat intelligence a position that's mostly done as sort of part of a company, or are there freelance opportunities in this area? Are there, can you sort of like offer your service, especially if you've done it for a while, can you sort of offer your services to an organization, or do people mostly just have like an in-house threat intelligence unit?
Yeah, so there's kind of both, I'd say. In my experience, there's a lot of freelance opportunities available. The way I would capture it is, rather than sort of thinking of it as freelance versus with a company, I would think of it as there's companies of all shapes and sizes in threat intelligence. You've got large organizations that do sort of consulting threat intelligence, where they provide threat intelligence to other organizations. You've got smaller companies that provide threat intelligence to small to medium-sized businesses, or might have a unique niche in the threat intelligence field. Like they might be a threat intelligence company that just does dark web, right? That's something that's out there as well. There's also threat intelligence organizations within companies. So that's the way I think of it, is sort of, I have the legal background. So to me, it's sort of like the difference between in-house counsel versus working for a law firm.
Okay.
For a law firm, you work for a lot of other companies, but you don't work for yourself specifically.
There you go.
In-house counsel works just specifically for the one company. And there's advantages to both, right? Working in-house, the nice thing is, if you're doing in-house threat intelligence, you can really focus on this one organization, make sure that you're doing the best possible threat intelligence just for that company. But the downside, arguably, is that it's not quite as diverse. So if you're having kind of a slow week, you might just be having a slow week. When you're doing threat intelligence for an organization that works with many other organizations, you're kind of constantly bouncing around between different industries, which means you have to understand a lot more industries, and it's a little bit more, can be a bit challenging in some ways. But the bright side is there's always something going on, which I really like. I really enjoy being busy. So that's why I enjoy working for IBM, because we always have things going on. There's always different industries to be aware of, and being a global company, there's a lot of global components there as well.
Now, if you have a full sort of threat intelligence staff, and you were saying that there's sort of like 3 or 4 sort of primary places, the dark web or what have you, like, do people have sort of a specialty in terms of like, Jill here is the dark web person, and Bob talks, looks at, ransomware situations. Can you sort of subspecialize within it, where you are mostly sort of looking at one thing, or is everyone kind of looking at everything and synthesizing data and so forth?
It really depends on the organization, and there's a lot of different theories on the best approach. And I'm not sure that I necessarily know the best one. The ones I've seen most commonly tend to be you can have people who are focused on threat types, or specific threat actors. Usually those are sort of geographically aligned. Alternatively, I've seen places that you might have somebody who's like, they just do dark web. They're just really, really good at dark web. And that works well too, because then that person is really your key go-to person. It really just kind of depends on the organization, how they want to structure it. If you're kind of getting into this field, trying to think of how you want to best market yourself, I think those are kind of the 2 main marketing elements. Either say like, I speak a language, especially if you speak a language from one of the big countries. You could say, I speak that language. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about threat actors from that area, and then I'm going to market myself as somebody who is a specialist in this region. That's a great way to market yourself in this area. Or alternatively, you can say, I am just really, really good at open source, and I am the open source guy, and everyone's going to come to me for their open source needs. And in that case, you want to build out those open source skills. I've seen both. They're both definitely needed skills in different organizations, so they're both very good approaches.
Okay. So tell me, do you have any certifications? Like, and do you feel like there's any particular certifications that are important for people looking to get into threat intelligence?
I have CISSP, which I think is a valuable certification just from kind of writing that executive understanding and sort of learning more about what executives are thinking. I think if you're just starting out in this field, I'm not sure it's as critical, but as you get sort of further into the field, the nice thing about CISSP is it does provide insights into what your audience might be worried about. And that sort of insight really helps you make your product more effective for them. But otherwise, for other certifications, I don't have a lot of recommendations. I know that Security Plus is a good one. I've heard good things about that, but I personally don't have it. I did some studying for it, and it seemed very good. And also, if you feel like you need more technical acumen, Network Plus is also a good one as well. Okay. But there are many good certifications out there. I can't speak to all of them, I'm afraid.
Of course. Yeah, no, yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, CISSP is, you're basically studying how perimeters work, so it's perfect.
Right. Well, what's great about that, I think, is that by understanding sort of what the executive level of the C-suite is thinking about when they're looking at things, it helps you tailor your threat intelligence products to speak their language. Because ultimately, if you're not speaking their language, they're not going to read it or they won't understand it, both of which are bad.
Yeah. So you gave us some really good tips for sort of like getting your foot in the door with, especially the organization that you worked with. But sort of what are some of the steps along the way to go from a low level threat intelligence, technician to cyber threat expert? Like I remember when we were talking to a security analyst, and he was saying, like, if you want to go up to security manager, automate yourself out of your job. He was saying, like, if you create enough sort of automated processes, then you sort of like, the stuff that you're doing rotely, is already handled, and then you can sort of handle the next level thing up. So like, how do you sort of automate yourself, quote unquote, out of a low level threat intelligence job into what you do?
It's kind of a tough question, but I'll do my best to answer that one. I think the primary way you do it, and it doesn't sound like a good answer, but it's the best one I can really give, is you have to just learn a lot about what's going on in the threat intelligence realm. You have to, I think the main way you kind of get to that next level is when you read a report that says, they're using SQL injection to drop ransomware. When you start off, you say, oh, that's interesting. They're using SQL injection to drop ransomware. But when you sort of start, after you've done this, a number of times and you've seen ransomware being dropped in a number of different ways, then you can start asking questions like, why are they using, SQL injection to drop ransomware? That's kind of weird. Or why are they dropping ransomware? This month they're usually been doing crypto miners. And so as you develop experience and start learning the different ways in which things have been done historically, then you can start sort of seeing the broader picture and picking out the trends that are interesting and why they're interesting a lot faster. And I think that's really what leads to a more effective threat intelligence expert.
Okay. So what advice would you have for people who are looking to make a career switch into cybersecurity from other careers? Like you say, you had other areas of interest and stuff. So like from it, whether you're just picking it up from this episode or you've been thinking about it anyway, from an interview perspective, what are some things that you can sort of put on your resume or in your cover letter or talk about in your interview that would make your prospective employer know that you'd be great for this job, even if you don't have, the correct signposts in your resume to indicate that?
It's a really interesting question. Obviously, I'm going to go back to the SFS thing again and say, if you're looking to go into cybersecurity, check out this program. It's great. Get a master's degree in cybersecurity. But beyond that, I think to me, there's two things that really stand out about someone. The easiest one for someone to start doing is read the news. You have to be really well versed in what's going on in the world, especially in the threat intelligence world, or in general, just the cybersecurity world. Yeah. So, beyond just your basic CNN.coms, right? Also go out and start reading things like Bleeping Computer, where you're going to get really good security news. Yep. Because in an interview, when I'm talking to someone, if they're referencing the latest and greatest activity that they've been seeing, based on their reading of open source articles, that indicates to me that somebody has interest in cybersecurity and is willing to, take the extra step of actually reading stuff about it and can understand it and digest it in an effective fashion. So I'd say that's one good way to sort of signpost, hey, I'm interested in cybersecurity and I get it. The other main thing that I've always looked for in interviews is just passion. Just somebody who's really passionate and excited about cybersecurity. And it's sort of a tough quality to explain how to make that come across, and everybody's going to show their passion differently. But doing your best to show this is something that you're passionate about, to me, I will, 10 times out of 10, take a passionate candidate, because that's somebody I can train anyone. You can teach anyone basic technical skills, but you can't train passion. That's something that's inherent in you, and something that if you're excited about it, then that's something that I want you to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, what, without, going into super granular detail, like what, we keep saying, well, if we can train you the tech and stuff, if you have the passion or you have the background, but like, what is the sort of baseline tech that a beginning threat intelligence person needs to know that you're probably going to train them in?
I'd say the two main things are going to be basic network protocols or basic networking. Okay. And a good way to think about this is, you should be able to understand, if I go on my computer to CNN.com, roughly what's happening from a network perspective. Yes. Just because that network understanding of, DNS resolution, basic network connection and protocols, and how information is sent back and forth, that sort of technical understanding, even if it's, medium depth, will help you when you're reading things to understand what's happening. The other key thing from a technical perspective that I have found helpful, and I know there's people on both sides of this issue, is the MITRE ATT&CK chain. I think is very helpful to understand from a threat intelligence perspective, because there's when you're thinking about how attacks happen, understanding, the process here of starting off, with reconnaissance, then you're moving forward to preparation, and then the actual attack, and then what happens after that, and the lateral movement. Understanding that sort of front to back process will help when you're learning what's going on by being able to slot that in. So say, oh, okay, so SQL injection is the initial infection, or is the vulnerability that's being exploited, but then the actual payload that's being dropped is ransomware. Okay, so I see now how these fit in to the overall timeline. So when I'm telling the story, I can help understand and kind of categorize where things are going. So I think that's a good framework. IBM also has our own internal framework that we use for threat chaining and sort of understanding the chain of events. It's a little bit unique, and I like it a lot as well, but it's a bit different from MITRE. But I reference MITRE's because that's one that a lot of people know.
Oh yeah,
We have if you're interested, check out IBM's attack chain as well. We have a pretty pretty good.
Yeah, no, we have lots of MITRE attack articles on our blog. So if you guys want to get a foot in the door, come check out resources at infosecinstitute.com, and also check out what was it? IBM's, what was it called? The threat maker.
It's our attack and preparation framework. I can provide a link or something for that as well.
Okay. So how has the threat intelligence landscape changed in practice since you began? You've been doing it for a while, and where do you see it going in the years to come? Like, has the sort of methodology changed? What are we doing differently these days?
That's a great question. So I'd say the way threat intelligence is done has changed a little bit in that there's a lot more people doing it. And that was sort of, as we were talking about before, in terms of freelance, you'll see if you go on Twitter, there's a lot of folks on Twitter posting threat intelligence of varying quality. There's some great people on there doing some really good stuff. There's also some people on there who are kind of just taking their best guesses and then putting out there as facts. So one of the big risks that you run into is people go out there and say, oh, I saw this on Twitter. Is it true? And it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Pardon me 1 second here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
The other thing that I've noticed has changed quite a bit is we're seeing a lot more So when I started, CrowdStrike was new, right? No one had heard of them. They were a brand new organization that was just getting started. Now, CrowdStrike is is a big player in the market, along with a number of others. So we're seeing a lot more big players that just do threat intelligence or do threat intelligence as sort of one of their primary missions. And I think that's great. I think it's great that there's a lot of folks out there doing threat intelligence because it makes all of our organizations better. Right. I think that by having more competition out there, we're all sort of forced into doing harder work, which I think is great. But one thing that's kind of come out of that as well is we found new ways to gather data and new ways to understand what's happening. We've also sort of expanded our strategic perspective because now that we've been doing this for a few more years, we as a broader threat intelligence community can start drawing on conclusions that from a much broader set. I mean, when I started off in this in 2011, the idea of a lot of these attacks were still relatively new, right? I mean, Stuxnet was still fresh in your mind,
right?
But that was really the only destructive attack you had seen. But now when you look, here we are in 2020, we've seen a whole handful of destructive malware attacks, right? Oh, yeah. And now IBM was able to put out a paper all about destructive malware because we've seen so many of these attacks. Whereas in 2011, when I started, we just didn't have that much data. There wasn't that much. It's not that necessarily things weren't happening. We just didn't have that much access to it. And really the only major threat intel groups tended to be government. Now we're seeing private industry really get into it more, which I think is great. And there's a lot of opportunities there for people looking to get into the field, but also a lot of great opportunities for us to sort of build a collective framework for threat intelligence, which is pretty cool.
Now, I'm guessing I know the answer to this because it sounds like it's such a, sort of personal and research-based thing. But apart from the ways that all our work lives have changed right now, has the practice of threat intelligence changed at all with the current pandemic?
I'd say the practice of it hasn't, for me at least. So realistically, threat intelligence in a lot of ways is a pretty decentralized field. Right. And so there's not a lot of need for people to be in offices. So for me, that hasn't made a major change. I think that's probably the case for a number of organizations. I think there's been some changes in terms of what we're seeing in threat intelligence, but in terms of the way it's actually practiced, thankfully the pandemic has had relatively minimal effect, in my experience, anyways.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the cyber threats that are currently looming largest on the horizon in your experience that you and IBM are engaging with the most frequently?
It's always a risky question because the minute you say anything, it changes, right? And
they see that you see them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. But I'd say I think the one thing that's kind of looming large in my mind at the moment is cloud security. I think that organizations are moving into cloud environments more and more, and realistically, threat actors get that, and they see that organizations are moving huge amounts of data into cloud environments, and that there's potential gaps or risks when you're kind of looking that could be present potentially. And so they're trying to take advantage of those wherever they can and find those gaps if they're there. And it's a good opportunity for a threat actor because it means that if I get in, I could potentially cause more harm than I could by just breaching an endpoint, and I don't have to worry about as much lateral movement. So there's a lot of benefit there. And so to me, where I see things kind of going is looking at how do we best secure cloud environments and what are the security considerations when we're looking at cloud environments and how can we make sure that we're best protecting them? As I'm sure you know, IBM's very heavily invested in cloud environments and cloud security.
Right.
And so this is something that we're uniquely interested in from a variety of perspectives, and including threat intelligence and understanding how threat actors are trying to break into that.
Okay, this has been a great talk. I just wanted to thank you for your time and insight here. Now, if people want to know more about Charles DeBeck or your doings at IBM, where can they go online?
You can find my profile on LinkedIn. Otherwise, securityintelligence.com, which is IBM's main site for information, has my profile on there, and then you can look at some of the other work I've done as well. But I'd say those are probably my two main recommendations.
Okay, and if you have any final tips for potential threat intelligence people?
No, it's a great field. I really enjoy it. It's a great combination of sort of the strategic understanding of how things work and that strategic understanding of geopolitics and computing and governance and networking, and taking all of that information and then somehow crafting it into a story that somebody can understand that doesn't have all that knowledge. So I think it's a great opportunity for folks to get into, and it's sort of a niche field, which is kind of fun. But I highly recommend it. I think it's great.
Well, Charles DeBeck, yeah, thank you very much, Charles DeBeck. Thanks for your insights. This has been so much fun, and I think a lot of people who are listening are probably doing some quick research right now to look into their new career. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
And thank you all for listening and watching today. If you enjoyed today's video, you can find many more on our YouTube page. Just go to youtube.com and type in Cyber Work with Infosec to check out our collection of tutorials, interviews, and past webinars. If you'd rather have us in your ears during your workday, all of our videos are also available as audio podcasts. Just search Cyber Work with Infosec in your podcast catcher of choice. And if you wouldn't mind, we'd love a 5-star rating and review and whatever you listen in. It always does help us to get to new listeners. So for a free month of the Infosec Skills platform, just go to infosecinstitute.com/skills. Sign up for an account, and there is a coupon code there. Type in CyberWork, all one word, all small letters, no spaces, and get your free month. Thank you once again to Charles DeBeck, and thank you all for watching and listening. We will speak to you next week.